So it pretty much goes without saying at this point, but the fourth phase of the MCU was pretty bad. I didn't even really cover it here on this channel because pretty much everyone else did, and I was kind of bored of the MCU at that point. I didn't even want to talk about it here. Now, I don't think the new Ant-Man movie changes that, but I do think it's a step in the right direction for the MCU. That's not to say this movie is fantastic. Matter of fact, it's overwhelmingly average. It has a really bad case of identity issues that we'll get into later, but I still think this is better than pretty much anything else that Phase 4 gave us, maybe outside of Wakanda Forever. I've always liked Ant-Man. He really is just a normal guy. He literally is a charismatic ex-convict turned Avenger. Paul Rudd is also super lovable and does a great job portraying him. So I do have a soft spot for the Ant-Man movies, I think. I'm probably one of the few people who liked Ant-Man and the Wasp. I mean, to be fair, if I went back and watched it now that I'm more critical of films, I'd probably hate it, but I'm too scared to do that. I want to enjoy that movie in my head. But my point being, the premise of Ant-Man is really fun because he's always this fish out of water superhero, no matter where he goes. I think for the most part, Quantumania does a really good job at taking that to a whole new degree and expanding upon that idea. The minute that I heard that Ant-Man would be facing off against Kang the Conqueror, both me and my friend texted each other and we were like, oh yeah, he's gonna die in this film. Speaking of which, this is a spoiler-free video. Don't worry about that. I'm not gonna tell you what happens in this movie. I'm not saying it does or does not happen. I'm saying it was my initial thought to hearing that he would be facing off against Kang the Conqueror. Although we were joking a bit at that moment, a real question did pop into my head. How are they going to make Kang a threat for 2 hours against Ant-Man? Well, they kinda didn't. Firstly, Kang doesn't appear in the film until like an hour in. They don't even say his name until like an hour into the film. They play the pronoun game for like the whole first hour. Like, I'm not kidding you. 5 different characters I can think off the top of my head reference Kang as he, him, the conqueror, or some variety of that for the first hour of this film. It is the most annoying thing ever, and that would not be the case if we didn't know Kang was in this movie already. He is plastered over every bit of promotional material, he's in the trailers, and he was in Loki, for Christ's sakes. We know who Kang is, we know he's here. We don't need to act like he's this big reveal. When he finally does appear, he still is a powerful threat, but he's actually pretty boring in the third act, unfortunately. Like, he's still a threat, he's still a threatening guy. I did not know how like the third act climax final fight of this film would end. For a second, I did not know how it would end. But when you watch this movie, a lot of the third act is him getting the Captain Marvel treatment, because if he was present in the fights, he would win all of the fights. He is not present because the movie knows if he was there already, the movie would be over. I do think the character of Kang, however, is great though. And Jonathan Majors is acting as if his firstborn child would be assassinated if this movie doesn't do well. His performance is stunning. He is quite literally giving Angela Bassett a run for her money for her performance in Wakanda Forever. I don't think I could tell you who did a better job because they both do amazing. Majors does an amazing job at making this character who, at the end of the day, is just another human when you really think about it, and he makes him feel like he is the only thing wrong in the entire universe. He takes this character and he makes him feel like he is the embodiment of malice and evil intent, and it is amazing. His facial expressions are so raw and powerful, and I was pretty much biting my nails when he faced off against any one of the main characters. The rest of the cast also does really well. I think Paul Rudd did better in this film than most of the other films that he appears in. There's one scene where he talks to Kang, and it is probably the highlight of his acting for this film. Oddly enough, I think Michael Douglas comes off to me as more phoned in from this film, and I don't really think that's his fault because I don't like what they did with the character of Hank Pym in this movie. In the first 2 films, he really didn't crack a joke unless it was at the expense of Scott, but in this movie, he gets MCU-ified and they treat him like he's a comic relief character. It doesn't really feel like Michael Douglas is able to do his best work when they have his character cracking jokes instead of giving thoughtful lectures. I think changing his character in this way is a large part of the reason why his acting may come off as a lot less present at some times. That being said, I do still think all of his jokes are funny. It just feels weird that they're coming from him, but we'll get to that in a bit. Michelle Pfeiffer is really good, and Cassie's new actor is actually quite good too. I mean, her script is ass, but her actor's good. I'm not sure why they changed her actor from Endgame to this film, but I do think Katherine Newton does a really good job. Evangeline Lilly though, she's kinda odd in this film. Her acting was good, but there wasn't even really enough of it for me to give you a definitive thought on whether or not it was good or not. Hope Van Dyne doesn't really do a lot in this movie. Like, this doesn't feel like an Ant-Man and the Wasp film because the Wasp hardly feels like she's around. She's usually not the main focus of any of the scenes that she's in. Most of this movie's focus is on Janet due to her prior connections to the quantum realm. Speaking of which, let's talk about that. I'd like to say we discover more of her past, except we don't. There's one really fun character who shows up and explains a lot, but there is one ex machina that is quite literally never explained after the scene that it appears in. It's cute and I'm 99% sure it's a Star Wars reference. I'm not a Star Wars fan, but if you see this, you'll probably think the same thing too. But the fact that they don't explain in the slightest what just happened is kinda dumb. There's also this really dumb ex machina. Like, unbelievably stupid. Like, don't get me wrong, it makes sense in the terms of what happened in the film. It's explained, and I can actually specifically remember the establishing shot that specifically sets this up, but when you hear this, there's a 94% chance you're gonna roll your eyes and begrudgingly accept what just happened. When a main character explains a situation and they use the term "some kind of," you know it's just lazy writing. Let's be real. The pacing of this movie is pretty mid. The first 20 minutes of this movie feel both too fast and incredibly slow at the same time. The middle section is kind of a drag to get through, further exemplified by the fact that we don't meet or see the main antagonist until, once again, an hour in, but it does get a lot better when Kang shows up. The script is pretty good in my opinion for the most part. There's like 2 bits of classic groan-worthy MCU Phase 4 dialogue that you're gonna notice, but nothing really as bad as Thor: Love and Thunder, although that's not a hard bar to get over. I think all the jokes are going to make you exhale from your nostrils at the minimum, but this movie doesn't really have that many like laugh out loud jokes either. This movie does, however, have one too many of those cut the tension of an important scene by making a joke in the middle of it moments. They're not funny. I'm so tired of these. They would be funny if they didn't happen in every MCU movie, because at this point you're expecting the joke, which makes it less funny. But I am, however, happy to report that when Scott Lang says Ant-Man, we don't get a joke about how stupid the name Ant-Man is. But that all is to say, I do think for the most part, this movie is really funny. The scripts for most of the cast are good. Cassie is a well-written character, like her motivations are solid, but her script is so weird sometimes. Scott and Janet are pretty solid the entire way around. I don't really have any complaints for them, their scripts, or their characters in this movie. Though, like I said earlier, Hank and Hope aren't really as interesting as they were in Ant-Man 1 or Ant-Man 2. They're not really as driven. In my opinion, I really liked Hope in Ant-Man. I know some people didn't like her because she was just this female character with masculine traits that made her bearable for MCU fans. But I liked her because she didn't take and she was motivation driven. To me, the fact that those are masculine traits doesn't really make me think that she's a worse character, but I do think that the fact that she does something with those motivations is worth mentioning. But for some reason, she feels so forgettable in this movie, and maybe that's because she doesn't really have much to do. This is really more of an Ant-Man and Janet film, and then Cassie's the third main character, and then I would actually put Hank above Hope. Of the 5 main characters, yes, I genuinely do think Hope comes at the bottom of the importance list in this film. So it's a little upsetting that this character that I thought was pretty okay is kind of just shoved to the background for this movie. Especially because she's in the title of the movie, but once again, she doesn't really do much. There's like one scene I could think that she's genuinely important in. The side characters for this movie are actually pretty good. There's an MCU original character named Quaz who makes an appearance in this film, and he's actually my favorite character the entire movie. But that's just because I like The Good Place. There's one little guy who looks like he'll sell some merch. The best way I can describe this guy is if Meek from Thor Ragnarok could talk. M.O.D.O.K is such wasted potential though. If you've seen the trailer, you already know that he looks kinda weird. I'm going to be as vague as possible as I can to avoid spoilers, but his character is not what it should be. M.O.D.O.K should have been considerably more threatening than he is, and it is so confusing why he's not. We know what M.O.D.O.K is capable of, and he displays none of that. I mean, for Christ's sakes, his name is Mechanized Organism designed only for killing. I don't think he kills anything in this movie. And M.O.D.O.K's final arc comes to this really stupid conclusion out of pretty much nowhere. Like, it comes from somewhere, but when you see this, you're gonna think it's bullshit. Because it's bullshit. Also, he looks stupid. I am seriously trying to be vague, but I know some of you may have seen the leaks, and I don't want to spoil it for those of you who haven't, but he doesn't look malformed like he should. He just looks like a big face. Not a big head, a big face. It is literally just a normal guy's face blown up like 10 times the size, which not only is incredibly off-putting, but quite frankly comes off as a little lazy. And I can't tell for sure, but I think they did change the proportions of the face in minor ways. But if I'm not even able to tell that on first glance, then it probably isn't noticeable enough for me to call it good. The CGI for this film is pretty good, but we're going off MCU standards at this point. There are some times it sticks out like a sore thumb exactly how bad the CGI in this film is and can get. The first time that Cassie suits up is a very, very noticeable example of this. And something is off-putting about the way that Ant-Man looks when he grows into full size, but only when he's moving. I don't think it looked this way in the other Ant-Man films. Like, you'll notice it when he jumps and taps the opponent, you'll see it. I can't quite put my finger on exactly what it is that makes it look weird, but I can't be the only one who noticed this. All the movie sets are pretty much entirely CGI, and for the most part, I think they're good in that they feel creative. They feel like an actual place that it could exist in the quantum realm, but at times it's bad and it feels noticeable and it feels jarring for a character to be standing where they are. Like, it is overwhelmingly obvious that this is just a character standing in front of a blue screen. There is some good CGI at points. The highlight of the CGI is probably the scene that's actually in the trailer with all the shots of the Ant-Man and like the part where he unravels. You know, thinking back on it now, that's probably actually my favorite scene in the entirety of the movie for a couple reasons. I think it's well explained, it's really funny, and it makes sense, and it looks good. The music, I mean, there's not much to talk about. There's like 3 songs that actually caught my ear, but for the most part, it's what you'd expect from a Marvel movie at this point. The music does its job, but it doesn't stand out in any good or bad ways. Lastly, I'm gonna cover the thing that I dislike most about this movie personally. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but that is Janet, and more specifically her connections to the quantum realm. She as a character is fine, I actually like her in this movie, but all she does is not explain exactly what's going on. I've never understood why characters in movies can't walk and talk at the same time. There is literally a point in this film where the main cast has nothing but time on their hands and distance to walk in front of them, but she refuses to explain on what's going on because she says she'll explain it later. She gives the classic, "I can't do this right now," but why not? The lore of the quantum realm is explained so slowly to you by the time that anyone actually tells you what's going on, you've probably figured it out already. It is so aggravating that there are so many chances for her to tell us one thing about what is going on, and she just refuses to do it for some reason. This is further exemplified by the fact that they never reference Kang by his name, like I said earlier. Also, I'm now realizing this, but the movie tries to tell us she's the bad guy, and then once Kang shows up, they literally never mention it again. It's dropped. They never bring it up again. I don't even think some of the side characters that don't like Janet even see her in this film. I think that this movie's biggest actual problem, though, is the utter lack of identity that it has. It moves the MCU forward, which is why most people are going to remember this film. They're going to remember it because Kang is in it. But unfortunately, I think that's all people are going to remember. The movie is not bad, but there isn't anything special about it. It's a story we've seen a million times before with a different script and a different cast. It's not really that interesting. Most of the side characters, besides the 2 that I referenced, are extremely forgettable. I don't even remember the names of them, and one of them is on screen for quite a large amount of time. I mean, to be fair, it doesn't matter though, because we'll more likely than not never see them again. The fights in this movie are incredibly boring and pretty forgettable, and I think this largely has to do with the fact that the novelty of Ant-Man has worn off by now. Like, let's be real, Ant-Man 1 was interesting because he got small, Ant-Man 2 was interesting because he got big, and his appearance in Civil War was kind of trivial if we're being honest. There isn't really that interesting that happens in this fight that we haven't already seen before. There are like 4 fights, counting the third face-off, that I can even remember. But the only fight that I can specifically remember is the very, very last one in the movie, and it's probably the only one that I would even consider to be any variety of creative. Scott also doesn't really have a lot of time where he's actually 1v1ing Kang, which comes from the fact that he is incredibly out of his league. There is nothing that we haven't already seen that could make these fights interesting. Let's be real. If you put Ant-Man in front of Kang for more than 5 minutes, he is going to get his fade run, which is the problem. They can't make interesting fights with Kang because he's wildly overpowered. The same thing that happened in Captain Marvel. The locations are nice, but they're all considerably less interesting than anything we've seen in any of the 2 Guardians films that predate this movie. I don't even think any of the locations have names, now that I think about it, and if they do, I once again can't remember them. One thing I do actually like about the movie is the ending, like the very end of this film, like the last 2 minutes of it, are actually really good. It's somewhat played as a joke at first, but I like that the thoughts of consequences for the character's actions are still there. It's actually a really thought-provoking ending, even if it does it in more of a silly way. And I like that we see a more upbeat character be the one to deliver the seed of doubt into viewers' heads. So let's go over. This movie has action, it has writing, and oh boy, it sure does have acting in it at times. But yeah, it's a movie. It is by no means bad. I do think that for casual viewers, this is still a wildly enjoyable experience. Quick side note, I'm not these critical of films when I go to watch them. I go into films with an open mind and then dissect them after I've already seen the movie. If you go into any movie trying to be critical, all you will see is flaws. I enjoyed watching the movie. It was a fun popcorn flick. I think it's gonna come to about like an 8.5 for your average casual viewer. If you're a fan of the MCU or action comedies in general, this is an easy recommend. But critically, it's closer to like a 7, probably a 6. Let's call it a 6.5. It's not bad, but my biggest issue with this movie is that it's just not special. I do think that this is a step in the right direction for the MCU though. Having a designated big baddie on screen is a good thing. They introduced Cassie and I thought it's cool that we get to have an Ant-Man, Wasp, and Ant-Girl film? They never actually say what her name is, now that I think about it. Apparently her name in the comics is Stature, but I honestly think that sounds pretty goofy and they should change it. The CGI is not as bad as anything we saw in Phase 4 of the MCU, which is good. The writing is still a little underwhelming, but it doesn't have any of the glaring plot holes that you may find in something like No Way Home or Multiverse of Madness, which is good. I do have high hopes for Phase 5, which maybe is setting me up for disappointment, but I do think that this was a good start to Phase 5. The 6.5 that I gave the film might make it seem like I don't think that this was a good movie, but to me that score is just a little below average. It's just a D+. I'm definitely now looking forward to Season 2 of Loki in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Not that Guardians of the Galaxy is related to this film, it just looks really, really good. Anyway, go watch this movie, or Scott and Hope here will put you into the quantum realm.